You may be lucky enough to have a roof over your head, but not everyone has that luxury in Kenya. The country is facing a critical housing shortage with a deficit of nearly 2 million units. Now, earlier this year, the government passed a controversial levy that forces employed Kenyans to contribute 1.5% of their income towards housing construction. It claims that this levy will finance the construction of 200,000 affordable houses annually. But how realistic is that? And will it be affordable enough for the thousands of homeless people on the margins of poverty? DW's Edith Kimani reports from Nairobi.
A car mechanic by training, Anthony Mutunga, better known as T, spends most of his time with friends these days. The 32-year-old lost his job unexpectedly, and for the last 2 years, he's been homeless. The sudden and dramatic change in T's life led him here, to Mathare, one of Kenya's oldest slums, and to a very different life.
It's hard. It's hard. It's very, very hard. When you're in a capital city, you'd rather sleep hungry, but at least have somewhere to sleep. Shelter is a priority because you don't know what could happen to you when you're out here. There are thieves out here, diseases, police, and there are also the unknowns.
T needs 11 euros a month for rent here, but he's rarely called to fix cars these days, so food is all he can afford. It's getting dark, and the clouds have gathered. Rain is inevitable. Everyone rushes towards their homes as though by command. T leads us to a shack where a friend is allowing him to stay. The shack is damp and dark, and T knows he'll have to pay something or leave in a few days, so he keeps his things ready. In this environment, he has no control.
There are 2 of us who sleep here, but if friends come over, we welcome them here as well.
The following day, Nairobi's homeless wake up before dawn. Cocooned in sacks for warmth, most sleep fully dressed in their overalls and shoes, ready for work during the day. It's estimated that some 300,000 people in Kenya live this way. For people like Jeff, 3 euros a day can be the difference between living on the streets or here, in a windowless room with nothing but a bed and mattress. The clothes vendor sometimes finds the money, sometimes he doesn't. Life on the edge of homelessness.
It's easy to get stuck in this routine. You look for money for food and a room. If you buy drugs or alcohol, that's all you get. And your money is gone. Just like that.
We're back in Mathare to look for T, who we're told might be in the local drinking den. Here, we find the owner, Doreen, who offers her space to those with nowhere to go.
This is a life I've experienced, so I don't judge anyone. I give them somewhere to sleep, so when they get out of here, they can help others.
Her customers ask us to tell their stories.
We have problems like we've never seen before. Our houses were demolished, and everyone was asking where we could go. We still don't know what to do. But God bless this woman.
Doreen's den can sleep up to 9 men, and T has been one of them in the past. But tonight he's fortunate to have somewhere less crowded to sleep, at least for now.
Let's get more from Miriam Minor, a consultant in town planning, urban data and analytics for African towns and cities. Hello and welcome to the program. There's critical housing shortage in Kenya. Some reports suggest that an estimated 300,000 people are homeless. Tell us more about what is driving this.
Thank you very much. So some of the challenges that come around creating a lot of homelessness in Kenya is the fact that the growing population does not have adequate housing that is affordable, but also in the right locations where residents would need to live. So if you're trying to get to a city, access jobs, you also want housing that is within your budget within that town. So too much demand and too little supply creates conditions whereby prices are either too high or there's just not enough housing, and that creates conditions of homelessness among the population.
Right, which we saw in our report. So to try to address a housing crisis, the government introduced a controversial housing levy to continue collecting 1.5% of a worker's monthly pay, right? The levy is intended to pay for the construction of 200,000 affordable housing for poorer Kenyans each year. How realistic is that?
The challenge, I think, comes in when the levies are too much for the workers, perhaps too much in terms of the taxation that is happening on population. But at the same time, how long would it take for these levies at the fund to generate this kind of housing or the numbers of housing that are needed? So most of the critique and challenges you're hearing in the market is the taxation is already too high. So people are being taxed more than they can bear.
Right.
Additionally, even though the policies can support the production of housing, if it doesn't happen fast enough, or if the housing does not end up being affordable enough for residents, then we still have a problem, even though people are being taxed to produce more housing.
So should the government just build free houses for people?
Well, free housing comes with its own different problem, but you've already mentioned the key challenge. When people talk about housing affordability, the question is, how do you make housing affordable to households? Number one, you can raise incomes so that people can afford the housing that's already there, or you can keep trying to build more houses. And the question is, who is able to afford the houses that you're building? But the solution, I would not think, is the government trying to take over the role of housing production, because number one, Kenya is not necessarily an economy that can support mass housing programs. And number two, governments that have tried to build more and more housing, you find that you can never build enough housing as a government for the demand that is continuing to happen in the cities and in the counties. So the question is not necessarily build free houses. I think is perhaps support the housing markets that there are, is what I would say.
Can you share some, practical initiatives that could help solve the housing crisis?
Yeah, thank you. And I think we really underestimate the current patterns of investment that are happening in African cities. So if you look at cities like Nairobi, where we are, where the research is happening, in Lagos, in Cape Town, in Johannesburg, what you see is there's already a housing market that is working, perhaps not the best, but there is a housing market. Rental markets in Nairobi, for example, are really robust. The challenge is perhaps the very low income households still don't have enough to access or enter the housing ladder. So while national governments are trying to come up with large scale policies, which is what I think the housing fund, the housing levy is, it's a countrywide exercise trying to generate housing. What cities should do, I think it's a city government to look at its conditions and say, what is our housing market? Nairobi, for example, is very high percent rental. So Nairobi's policies should be leveraging government policies to improve rental markets within their boundaries. So that is to begin to use the markets that are there to say what is happening with the rental that is making people unable to afford. How can we support rental or subsidize it to ensure that current markets are being improved, for example, higher quality rental, but affordable rental. So as opposed to trying to change the cities from how they're doing, it's come in, meet them where they are and improve them and make them work better for the lower income households in the cities. I think those are the strategies. The cities that are trying to do that are moving faster, or at least getting closer to bridging the affordability gap than cities that are trying to introduce entirely new policies that are against the current markets in the city.
Thanks a lot for your time. Miriam Maina, consultant in town planning, urban data and analytics for African towns and cities with Pegasus Group. Thank you very much. Now, Cape Town in South Africa is also facing a housing crisis. There are concerns that an influx of Western remote workers are worsening the situation by driving up property prices. These so-called digital nomads earn in foreign currencies, giving them an edge over locals in the rental market. And South Africa's new 3-year visa for remote workers could attract even more of them, adding to concerns about affordable housing. DW's Dianne Hawker has more.
Cape Town is one of my favorite destinations I've ever worked from, and that's really saying something.
Hello from Cape Town. I am finally here check out my apartment for the next 6 weeks.
Online testimonials like this show how many digital nomads want to live and work in Cape Town. And who wouldn't want to relocate to one of Africa's most beautiful cities? Streets are clean in the city centre. People can enjoy walks along the Sea Point Promenade, and public transport is easily accessible. An abundance of cafes, restaurants, and co-work spaces also make it easy to work remotely. US citizen Courtney Simone made Cape Town her home for 3 months this year and hopes to make the city a regular destination. She runs her travel and adventure business remotely, often working from her phone.
I feel like you have so much variety, and again, the opportunity to meet so many cool people as you're working or as you're networking or just trying to get a vibe for the city.
But Cape Town's stunning location is also part of its problem, with the city flanked by an ocean on one side and a mountain on the other. This means locals and travelers are all competing for space in a narrow patch of land, and those with dollars and euros are winning the contest. The suburbs closest to the city centre, those closest to Table Mountain, have become some of the most expensive suburbs to live in, not only in Cape Town, but in the country as a whole. Woodstock is one such suburb. It was once a low-income neighbourhood. Now, apartment buildings are springing up on every corner, mostly catering to a growing nomad market. Here, a one-bedroom apartment costs about half of the average monthly salary to rent. For many locals, the housing crisis carries a stark reminder of the apartheid era, when black and brown people were only allowed to live in designated areas.
It becomes very difficult for us to find property because now it's either there's no property or the property is very expensive. It's also creating that segregation between people because now it's no longer about the color of your skin, it's all about what money you have.
But there are some people working to fix the problem, like the Development Action Group. The NGO advocates for housing policy changes that favour creating inclusive communities.
This is why we need to release land and earmark land in the inner city for affordable housing so that people can access housing close to economic opportunities and public transport.
There are no immediate solutions at hand, but a balance will have to be found. Because while digital nomads may bring much needed money into the local economy, residents of Cape Town say changes must be made to ensure the city remains a home for all.